I love the question because what you're getting at is a framework that we have called the power of polarity. If you want to create power, if you want to create draw or appeal, which is power, you have to polarize. You have to stand for something. Because if you don't stand for something, nobody really knows what you believe in. So you have to polarize. So to your point, there's lots of people on LinkedIn, there's lots of people on Facebook, on Twitter, or whatever, who are out there screaming something. They're making a point, and they're being drowned out by all the other people who are out there making a point.
Piers Morgan, Elon Musk,
Those are people who already have influence.
Okay, but it's part of how, well, like in the case of Piers Morgan, part of how he's got his influence is by
being polarity,
standing for
polarizing.
something and not being scared of the fact that people are going to tell him that they don't like him.
Even better, I want people to tell me that they don't like me. That's even better, because what happens is when you drive polarity, when you drive polar response, you create enemies, but you also create friends. And what do friends do when enemies attack? They defend, right? So when you stand for something, even if only a small group of people agree with you, they still defend you, they still support you, they still invest in you. That means they're moving from that avoidance, competition, compliance phase into know, like, trust. And then when they defend you, they can't help but fall into trust, because what are they defending? They're putting energy in defending you. So they're going to trust you even more. And when that group of people trusts you and other non-competitive people, other observers watch that some people are attacking you and other people are defending you, it makes them feel like they have to choose between attacking you or defending you.
Is there a way to stand for something correctly? And is there a way to badly stand for something? And I say this because as you were speaking, I was thinking about my friend. My friend is really, really bad at LinkedIn. And he comes to LinkedIn with like very inconsistent takes on the world. I'm going to give you an example. For many years, he's had a narrative about alcohol being bad, and he's been sober. But then the World Cup came around, and he posted on LinkedIn, the World Cup was in the Middle East, that the Middle East should allow people to binge drink, and posting against the sort of religious perspective that says alcohol is bad. So he was like, people should be allowed to binge drink if they want in the Middle East. But then his other perspective has always been that alcohol is bad. Yeah. And like, why do people binge drink? And so the inconsistency has really fucked him up, I think.
Well, that's showing why he probably also doesn't have much influence, because people don't know where he stands. So there's nothing to stand, like somebody who rallies behind him. Like, it sounds like when you were telling the story, to a certain extent, you were like proud of him when he was like,
originally, yeah, when he was clear what he stood for. But it's every day is a different take. I'm like,
and that's what costs you your influence. So he diminished his own power by not demonstrating polarity. He should have just stood a ground, even if the ground isn't popular, even if it's not popular or positive. If you stay in one place and you drive a clear polar message or a polarizing message, some people will rally behind you, some people will attack you. Either way, you benefit from it. This is one of the things I love about YouTube. I'm sure you've discovered this too. For anybody out there who's trying to make money on YouTube or grow an audience on YouTube or do anything with YouTube, needs to understand the best comments are oftentimes the worst comments. Because somebody chimes in and talks shit about something, it only instigates more people to come in and leave a comment. And guess what YouTube wants? Comments. They just want engagement, because engagement means people are on the platform. When there's a split between thumbs up and thumbs down, it means there's polarizing content, which means even more people are going to stay on the platform, so they spread it even further and wider. Right? So you can't be afraid of being polarizing. You have to lean into being polarizing. The way we use it at CIA is when you're talking to a spy, when you're talking to somebody and you want them to commit treason against their country, you have to be able to ask a polarizing question to find out whether or not they're going to hint that they would be traitors or whether they are staunch supporters and nationalists. But you have to test that barrier if you're ever going to actually develop the kind of relationship, the kind of power to convince them to commit treason.
It made me think about brands as well, because, there's a lot of brands out there that have done really, really well by standing for something, by being polarizing. Okay, and it was Jane Waring on my podcast that talked about her brand Dermalogica, and she said to me, you have to be willing to piss off the 80% to get your 20%. She goes, you don't need people to like you. She goes, that's not a brand. You need them to love you or hate you. She goes, that's a brand.
It's genius. It's absolutely correct. She is talking about polarizing. She's talking about that know, like, trust process and getting people to go beyond like into love you or hate you. If they love you or hate you, then they are in the trust side of the know, like, trust process. They either trust what you say or they trust that they're going to hate what you say. But either way, they're in the trust part of know, like, trust.
What else do I need to know about influence and influencing other people? You said persuasion is not the same as, what was the other one? Influence?
Influence, yeah.
Persuasion and influence are two different things. So what about persuasion then? How do I persuade somebody?
Persuasion is a process that's much easier because it's really just a matter of triggering an emotional response and then guiding rational thought around that emotional response. Honestly, persuasion is what exists far more in the world than influence. Persuasion is what happens in advertising. Persuasion is what happens when you watch a commercial. Persuasion is what happens when you try to convince your kids to brush their teeth at night, or one day you will convince your children to brush their teeth at night. That's all persuasion because you are creating an emotional message. It's a question of messaging and narrative. You're creating an emotional message. That emotional message is designed to trigger certain emotional responses in the target that you're talking to. And then you change the message itself, but you hit on the same emotion. And the reason that you do that is because after they've been hit with enough of the same emotional messages, they start to develop a cognitive, rational narrative that they adopt personally. So the narrative of the deep state came from lots of emotional messages about why you can't trust the government. And then all those emotional messages turn into somebody or a group of people thinking, well, if I can't trust the government, what I can do is trust that the government can't be trusted because there's a shadow government, right? So that's how you persuade somebody. So if you want to persuade someone to buy from your coffee shop and not somebody else's coffee shop, you want to persuade someone to buy a Subaru and not a Nissan, you want to persuade somebody to buy from your sales funnel immediately instead of wait until your third email in your welcome series. It's all a matter of being able to set up a series of emotional messages that drive a rational narrative that they decide for themselves that brings them to a place where they take an action that you want them to take.
Give me an example.
Okay, so let's say that you and I are trying to sell.
What about this whoop on my wrist? Hashtag ad, hashtag investor, hashtag sponsor. What about this whoop on my wrist?
All right.
You understand how a whoop works?
What is it? Tell me what it is.
It's a fitness tracker, but it's a sleep tracker. It's a stress tracker. Tracks my heart rate variability.
So it's biodata.
Yeah.
It syncs your biodata in one convenient place.
Yeah. And I can see my friends' biodata as well if they accept, so we can kind of compete a little bit.
So it gives accountability and a sort of shared mission.
Yeah, and community, etc. Yeah.
Right? So if you want to persuade people to buy your hashtag sponsor, hashtag product, hashtag investor, what's it called?
Whoop.
Whoop.
Yeah.
We want people to buy a Whoop.
Whoop.com, yeah.
So
/DOAC.
Perfect. So if we want people to buy a Whoop, we don't tell them buy a Whoop because it's an awesome bio tracker that tracks your heart rate and tracks your sleep and tracks your body temperature. We don't tell them that because there's other tools that do that. What we have to do is give them some kind of emotional message, right? So first, we're going to choose an audience that we want to create an emotional message for. We both love the women that we're with. So let's talk about people who are in a serious relationship or a committed relationship. I very much care whether my wife is healthy, whether she's sleeping well, whether she's got high stress. So now I want to craft an emotional message about how Whoop will help me make my marriage better because I'll be able to see what my wife is feeling without having to ask her.
Oh God, what every man wants, to be able to read her mind.
Now people are feeling something, right?
Sales. That's amazing. Say that again down the camera.
So let's come up with another message, another emotional message for the same reason, right? I really don't like bedtime because at bedtime, my wife always melts down and yells at the kids. And she melts down because she's had a rough day. And I'm coming home from a rough day and I have no idea how rough her day is. And it doesn't matter because now it's bedtime. So if I had a Whoop, what I'd be able to do is call my wife on the way home and say, hey, babe, it looks like you've had a rough day thanks to your Whoop. Why don't you take 30 minutes, go take a bath, do your whole self-care routine first, and I'll deal with the kids and I'll make dinner so that you can calm down, and then you can swap out and help me, and we can be a team, right? Whoop makes married couples a team again.
I love that.
So you can, now what we're doing is we're messaging to make husbands and boyfriends feel a certain way about, I love her already, I want her to succeed, and I also secretly know that if she succeeds, I succeed, because guess who goes to bed with her at night, right? That's what we're making them feel. So if we did 4, 3, 4, 5 messages like that, even if they were bullets on a sales page instead of a phone telecom team, right? If we were to do that, what's the logical, rational outcome that any male in a serious heterosexual relationship is going to land on?
They'd take the 30-day free trial.
That's exactly what they're going to do. That's exactly what they're going to do with high probability, that is empirically sound, that you can measure through clicks, open rates, and view time. Because you've crafted a persuasive message.
And what do people typically do? Brands will typically come out and say something like, oh, they'll sell it on its features.
Successful brands, which is the only kind of brand that really exists, because you're not a brand until you've had success. Successful brands will do what you and I are talking about, but they won't systematize it. They'll let it be accidental. You've heard of, like, I'm shocked how often advertising agencies create failed ads, like bad ads, because they're just throwing spaghetti at the wall. They're not following a system. They're not following a process, like what we just talked about. Create a series of messages and then create a rational response that's high probability, and then find a way to measure it all, and then systematize it, and then scale your ad spend to match the thing that you just built, right? That's not what they're thinking. They're thinking, what if we just talk about this? What if we just talk about this? This just happened in the news. Let's talk about that. So they're not using a system. The place where most people go wrong isn't with brands, it's with young entrepreneurs. It's with young entrepreneurs who become so myopically focused on their product that they forget that there's 4 P's for marketing. Product is just one of the 4, right? There's also price, there's also place, there's also promotion. Promotion is the one that I would say should be swapped with persuasion. Because if you can promote something in a persuasive way, doesn't really matter what you price it at, doesn't really matter where you put it, and it also doesn't matter what the product is. People will buy it because there's a market for everything. So the place where people go wrong isn't that they're not trying. The place where people go wrong is that they don't realize that talking about the benefits, talking about the rational benefits of the product is not persuasive. Persuasion starts with an emotional message.
How do you translate that then to a interpersonal relationship context where I'm trying to, convince you talked about interviewing earlier. You said that one of your case studies is a guy that kind of learned how to interview. How do I translate that so that if I walk into any interview ever, I'm going to walk out with the job?
What do you think every interviewer is looking for?
Well, okay, so I've got 2 answers to this. A, someone to do the job, and then B, someone they like.
That's really what they're looking for, is someone they like.
I do a lot of interviewing. I spend a lot of my time interviewing. When I'm not doing this, I'm basically interviewing people. So I've come to learn my own biases in that regard a little bit. But you're so right. It's heavily about if you like the person.
Well, guess what? I just taught you a framework for how to get through getting someone to like you, right? So without a doubt, we agree.
Well, that was to get me influence, the framework, wasn't it?
Know, like, trust. We went through the sense-making framework.
Yeah.
So that you could go from know to like to trust. So at the top of sense-making, that's when you're in the phase where people like, are invested in you. Yeah. What interviewers really like isn't people that they like. It's people who are alike the interviewer.
Really?
So I guarantee you that the people that you have liked interviewing the most, I'm even willing to bet that you will admit in this conversation at some point, we'll put that on the line, that a big portion of your hiring is because you see elements of yourself in the people that you hire.
I mean, like, I don't consciously know that, but I totally believe it.
Because when you see someone who reflects elements of you, you immediately go through the sense-making process and you flip to like and trust.
Interesting.
Because
so we need to clarify this, because when you say elements of myself, there's parts of myself that I'm like, I would never hire.
Correct. But that's not the part of you that you like.
Yeah.
It's the part of you that you don't like. You trust that part of you to not be good at the job.
Yeah.
But there's other parts of you that you trust to be good at the job, and that's what you shoot for.
Yeah.
Right? I'm also willing to bet that there's people that you hire because you know that they're good at areas that you know you're bad at.
Yes.
So that's all interviewers. All interviewers everywhere, what they dream of is that they walk into an interview and across the table is someone almost exactly like them, who they enjoy talking to, who they can relate to, who they feel instant connection and chemistry with, because then it becomes an enjoyable interview. Because what every interviewer hates is walking into an interview that is draining and terrible and hard and painful. That's what they don't like. And most of the time, the people interviewing are not actually the people who will be the supervisor for the person that gets hired. Oftentimes, they're just an intermediary interviewer. So all they really want is to just find somebody who meets the qualifications technically, but has some sort of common ground with the interviewer themselves.
So fresh, so